Chapter 15. Ardov had always carried himself arrogantly, but there was something different about him now. He had a smugness in his swagger that made the old Ardov seem humble by comparison. I couldn't tell what it was. He looked exactly like I remembered him. Brownish fur, short whiskers, self-satisfied expression. But he also looked different in ways I couldn't explain. I'd always disliked him, and I had even been afraid of him. But now he seemed more menacing than ever. "What are you doing here?" Misun was already on her feet, pointing at Ardov like they'd been bitter enemies. It wasn't the case, though. Not exactly. She hadn't much cared for Tamret during most of our time on Confederation Central, and conflicts among the Rurals had been of little interest to her. She hadn't even borne much of a grudge after he had beaten her so badly in the fighting sim, she'd ended up in the hospital. Now it was different. It was us against them, and Ardov was a them. "I thought you went back home with the other Rurals." Ardov shrugged. "Junip decided he wanted me to stick around. He pulled me off the shuttle before it departed and made me an offer, which I accepted. Now here I am, helping him out, which means now I'm helping you out. The interim director has assigned me to take care of you." "I get the feeling you all know this, cat person," the colonel said to me. I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing constructive was going to come out, so I closed it again. This marked a major development in maturity, I thought. "He was part of the delegation from a planet called Rural," Charles explained. "He was rather a bully." "Explains why the interim director took a shine to him," the colonel observed. "Maybe we should forget what happened before," Ardov said. "Let's start over fresh." He walked over to me and looked down from his superior height. I didn't know how to read his tone. Was he actually trying to be reasonable with me? If so, I would be the bad guy if I refused to bury the hatchet. On the other hand, I couldn't forget or forgive the way he had treated Tamret, and with her coming back to the station, I didn't want to show any signs of weakness now, particularly since neither of us was going to have augmented skills to help us against Ardov's superior strength. I had seen the guy fight, and he was pretty much unstoppable, even without a technological edge. "In case you were wondering," Smelly told me, "I detect no signs of sincerity in this hairy container of moisture. I believe it means you harm, and therefore by extension, me. I don't like things that mean me harm." I felt myself relax. It was no picnic having Ardov as an enemy, but it beat not knowing what to make of him at all. Now I had a handle on where I stood. I liked that, even if where I stood was no place anyone would ever want to be standing. "Sure, Ardov," I said. "Let's start over." And the two of us having just lied to each other, we were ready to move on. Ardov ushered us out of the transportation hub and loaded us onto a shuttle. There was no doubt he had picked up some polish in the last year, but even without Smelly's insights, I would have never trusted him. He'd been a bad kid before he'd gone to work for Junip. I didn't see how that particular association could possibly have made him any less bad. Besides, why would Junip have plucked him off the shuttle if he hadn't liked Ardov's cruelty and inclination to violence? Maybe that was the point. To have a mean, remorseless, non-Confederation type around to do his dirty work. Even so, Ardov had to have something going for him other than a cruel streak if Junip was going to hire an alien equivalent of a middle school kid to be his fixer. No one said much on the ride over. We all looked out the window at the city below, especially Alice and Colonel Rage, who had never seen Confederation Central before. Charles, me son, and I were veterans, but we still stared like country bumpkins in the big city. The huge glittering skyscrapers, the sprawling parks, expanses of residential houses, and the forests and deserts in the far distance. They hadn't lost any of their magic. We touched down at the compound landing pad and climbed out of the shuttle. The campus looked exactly like I remembered it from the last visit, except now there were far more black-uniformed peace officers than I recalled, and most of them had movement for peace armbands. There were the generally squat buildings, separated by walkways and lawns of purple grass. "Do you know what the guys with the purple armbands are like?" Charles asked me as we walked among them to our building. "Do you recall the Night Watch from Babylon 5? I nodded. The Night Watch was just like the Movement for Peace, an organization within the military and law enforcement meant to keep an eye on alien influence, but really just a front for bullies and thugs who wanted an excuse to hurt others and feel powerful. It's a good point, but don't try to outdork me.
Or that original Star Trek episode, he continued.
Yeah, I said Patterns of Force, Season 2, Episode 19, I think. Late in the season, anyhow. What did I just say about outdorking me?
You have let yourself be outdorked, Charles assured me.
Also, it was Episode 21,
Alice said. Ardov led us to the same building in the government compound where we had been housed the last time. Only now, there were a couple of Movement for Peace goons checking data bracelets for ID signatures at the door.
Got some primitives, I see, said one of them.
It looked like a big floor lamp with limbs. It moved its hooded head over towards us as if giving us a good sniff.
Try not to contaminate your betters.
As if they could help it, Ardov said. Did you guys memorize the Evil Oppressor Handbook or something? I asked. Because you have moronic banter down cold. The floor lamp pivoted towards me slowly.
Amuse yourself with your savage conception of humor,
it said.
For all the good it will do you.
Maybe I will, I shot back. Alice looked at me quizzically. Okay, I admitted. I couldn't think of anything punchy, but next time for sure. Ardov walked us to our room, explaining the facilities to the Colonel and Alice like they were all guests at a fancy resort. He said we would have freedom to move around the compound, but not to leave it for any reason. We were not to speak with data collectors, and our ability to communicate with anyone outside the compound had been neutralized.
I know you lost all your possessions when you destroyed a Confederation vessel full of loyal citizens, he said. So you've all been provided with clothes sufficient for your stay.
He led us down a hall and gestured towards a room which Charles and Colonel Rage were to share. Neither was very happy with that arrangement.
Does Zeke not have to share a room?
Charles asked.
I'd worry about bigger things than who you're bunking with, Ardov told him. All of you have really stepped in it, and there are going to be some serious consequences.
Colonel Rage leveled his gaze at him.
Your boss told us the same thing, but it seems to me, if we hadn't overturned the apple cart, we'd be dead right now. So you'll have to forgive me for not feeling apologetic about messing up anyone's plans.
Ardov was tall, but not as tall as Colonel Rage. Still, he didn't look even slightly intimidated when facing off with the soldier.
I guess we'll have to hope it all works out for you then. I think these kids have shown that they can look after themselves, the Colonel said. If you want a demonstration of our power, Ardov said, I'm sure something can be arranged. Something even primitives like you could understand.
How about we all just go to our rooms and get some sleep, I said.
Ardov smirked. I can always count on Zeke to find a diplomatic way to avoid getting smacked around.
I met his gaze. I have a very clear memory of being there while you were getting smacked around, Ardov. I shouldn't have said it, but it slipped out. Now he was standing over me, looking down, grinning.
There'll be plenty of time to settle old scores, he assured me.
So, are you two just going to make macho threats all day?
Alice asked. She was leaning against the wall, arms folded, looking bored. Ardov smiled at her.
Like I said before, the past is the past. Thanks for reminding me.
Alice just glared at him. She wasn't about to be sweet-talked by this jerk. Another check in her plus column. He looked directly at her, pouting like he was doing a photo shoot for a boy band.
You and I don't have any bad history to overcome. Maybe we can be friends?
Alice shrugged.
We'll see how you treat the friends I've already got.
Ardov began walking again, and we followed him past a few more doors, and he gestured to a room.
You'll be staying here with me, son, he said, looking directly at Alice. If you need anything, message me. I'm here to be of assistance.
Alice rolled her eyes.
I get it. Divide and conquer. Get me on your side and make the others uncomfortable. Anything else?
She turned away, and the two girls went into their room. Now it was just me and Ardov in the hall. Ardov moved down one more door.
This is yours, he said.
Okay, I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. I did not much care for being alone with the guy, by which I meant I was struggling against the urge to drop to the floor and curl up into a ball. He and I had been enemies before, but back then there had been rules to keep him in line. Now he was hired muscle working for a guy who had likely just arranged my murder.
I hear Tamrette's on her way to the station, he said.
If there was something to shift me from scared to angry, however, that was it. Yeah, that's right.
It'll be nice to get everyone back together, he said. Catch up on old times.
I let out a breath. Ardov, maybe you're thinking that kissing Junip's butt and hanging out with the armband crew makes you untouchable, but you've been convinced of your superiority before. I seem to recall that it didn't work out so well for you. How about we all just do our best to avoid trouble?
I'm not here to make trouble, he said. I'm here to enforce order and uphold the right of superior beings to live without primitives corrupting their way of life. The way I see it, you are the trouble that's already been made.
I suggest you don't antagonize it, Smelly said. Picking fights will not help us, particularly with this being.
I knew Smelly was giving me good advice, but I wasn't in the mood to let Ardov say whatever he wanted. And what are you exactly? An errand boy for a coward and a thief?
You are Junip's enemy, Ardov said. That makes you my enemy. I haven't decided about your girlfriend. She's got one over on me before, but that was when she was cheating and I had to follow the rules. This time, things are different.
Zeke, I'm getting some interesting readings from this meatbag, and by interesting I mean unexpectedly terrifying. I urge you to exercise caution.
Smelly was making about as much sense as he ever did, but I wasn't about to let Ardov get away with threatening Tamrette. If you even think about laying a finger on her, I began, but that was as far as I got. I should clarify, that was as far as I got in the conversation, because in physical terms I got much further. Down the hall, to be precise. Ardov pushed me with one hand and I was airborne, shooting down the corridor like a potato out of a spud shooter. I landed a good 30 feet away from Ardov, who still had his hand out, and slid a few body lengths along the carpeting before finally coming to a halt.
The strange readings I'm getting, Smelly said, may be related to his augmented skill tree. He has decoupled it from the leveling system so other beings can't detect it, but he has achieved maximum levels in all fields.
As I sat there, feeling the pain spreading from my butt into my legs, as well as an entirely separate ache in my ribs, I realized I understood why Junip had picked Ardov. Only non-Confederation citizens could have their skill trees hacked. Junip wanted Ardov so he could hack him, so he could have his own personal super soldier.
Now do you get the picture?
Ardov asked. He walked over to me and held a hand out to help me up. I ignored it and scrambled to my feet on my own.
So yeah, he said. Anything you need, just message me. You disgust me with your savage ways, and you're an insult to the Confederation even being on this station, but hey, I'm here to help, so let me know how I can make your stay as comfortable as possible.
He turned and strode gracefully down the hallway while I limped to my room. As with most private spaces in the Confederation, the door was biometrically sealed, which meant that only a being authorized to enter could enter. I needed no key. I pushed the door open, not quite sure what to expect. After a terrible series of days, I was ready for yet another unpleasant surprise. But this time, the surprise was pretty good.
I get to bed by the door, mate. Better that way, if I need to get out quick.
Steve stood there, tall, muscular, and lizardy, wearing one of his Ishi tunics and looking as much like a deadly predator as he had the first moment I'd seen him. Back then, I thought he was there to kill or possibly eat me. He'd not been planning to do either, and had turned out to be someone who always had my back. He moved in lightning fast for a big hug, nearly shoving my organs out through my mouth before he finally let me go, and I fell to the floor.
Sorry, mate, he said, holding out a hand. Not used to being around anyone so fragile. Didn't mean to crack your delicate bones.
Not a problem, I said, grabbing hold and letting him hoist me up. I tried not to think about how this was the second time I'd been knocked down in less than 2 minutes. I'm just a little off my game from having nearly been launched into orbit by a shove from Ardov. He's here, you know.
Yeah, I saw that git.
He's been hacked.
Know that too,
Steve said.
Smacked me around a bit to show he could. Kept calling me primitive, like his planet is somehow more advanced than Ishi. I'm waiting for my chance to get back at him.
I'm with you on that. So, yeah, welcome back to the Confederation. Steve sat down on his bed, hitting some keys on his plasma keyboard, and calling up the video image of the assassination attempt.
Not off to a good start. You come off like a chump and Mr. Shaggy Bloke looks like the hero.
No kidding. Getting killed would have only been slightly worse than letting Junip save me.
That scaly lump of flesh clearly doesn't understand the assassination attempt was a sham.
I couldn't say anything without tipping Steve off, and I wasn't sure how I wanted to broach the subject, even with my friends. So I merely nodded, hoping Smelly would take that as a sign to continue.
Why are you nodding at me like you've got a secret? Steve asked. You look daft.
I think it was a setup, I told Steve. I think Junip staged the whole thing to make him look like a hero and make me look like I caused trouble when I'm not even trying.
That was pretty obvious, yeah? Steve said. First thing I thought of, so what do we want to do about it?
I gestured to the room around us, hoping to indicate that I felt sure we were being listened to. Steve nodded, and I knew he got it.
I'm sorry about Niana and Urch, mate.
Yeah, I said.
She got on my nerves, but she was one of us. And she came through when it mattered.
She did, I agreed.
I don't know what we're doing here, he said, his voice very quiet, or what all of this is about. But the geezers responsible for what happened to her, they're gonna pay.
I nodded again. This was something that Steve wanted the eavesdroppers to hear. It was foolish bravado, and it could only make our enemies more cautious, but I didn't care. It was good to have my friend back.